Now, for more on the state of municipalities in the country, as well as what we've just heard now in that case against Ace Magashule, we're joined via Zoom by political analyst Dr Ntsikelelo Breakfast. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Breakfast, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Dr. Breakfast, before we get into the state of municipalities in our country, I'd like you to get your comment just on that recent development as it relates to Ace Magashule, his case being dismissed by the Johannesburg High Court, and particularly the comment there coming from the ANC saying that they feel vindicated by their original decision to suspend him.
Yeah, so I think whether you like it or not, I don't think that the Ace Magashule is going to bounce back. I'll tell you why. Because when you examine his argument, I don't think that it is well structured and well articulated as it stands. Because he participated in the refinement of the principle of stepping aside. Secondly, on the one hand, he wants the decision that he made unilaterally to suspend the president to be withheld. On the other hand, he wants his suspension to be done away with using the same principle. So clearly you can see that there are contradictions there. And because of that, I think his argument is going to be dismissed, even if he takes it to the Constitutional Court.
But there is no doubt, according to you, that his future looks very limited within the governing party, the ANC, and also any future prospects that he may have to be the president of the ANC.
Of course, I think if he had an issue with the principle of stepping aside, he should never have participated in the refinement of that principle. He should have walked away. But because he was part and parcel of that and only objected to that when it was applied to him, it weakens his argument. At the same time, I am well aware about some of the complexities which are at play and the politics at play, because I think some people maybe they have never accepted his ascendancy to the position that he held of the secretary of the organization. And maybe that's why, because we must remember when he was elected, that outcome of his was a bone of contention. So maybe some people knew that very soon that principle will kick in and it will be used to outmaneuver him. But as things stand, I don't think that he can bounce back. And the conference of the ANC is just around the corner.
Now, Dr. Breakfast, let's shift our conversation to municipalities now, as we have less than 6 weeks, I believe, before people go and vote for the upcoming local government elections. Our municipalities are not looking great. We've just had a report, as you've heard now, community in KwaZakele, in Gqeberha, one gentleman who's 30 years old saying that the township is what it was since he arrived there in the 1990s. We know that few municipalities received clean audits in the last audit. What does this mean as we head to, to the elections, and also about the governing standards in municipalities in South Africa?
Local government is an important sphere of government because it is closer to the people on the ground. It is in the front line of development. Now, the challenge is that, in my opinion, the model of development that is used by many municipalities is wrong. I'm referring to the neoliberal model of development. When you look at the anti-poverty strategies of municipalities, namely IDPs. The IDP is a 5-year strategic plan of the municipality. The baby of that is the LED. Now, those strategies are inspired by market-related values. For instance, the idea that if you want to promote development, you must privatize services, you must use public-private partnerships, and also the policy of BE. I understand that BE is a complex policy because on the one hand, it promotes state interventionism. On the other hand, it is meant to create what ANC members call the patriotic bourgeoisie class. But those policies have not achieved their intended objectives. Instead, they've created a scope for corruption. I think many people at local government level, whether you like it or not, they see municipalities as a terrain of accumulation, as a place to make ends meet, in particular those ones in category A municipalities, and also because of the lucrative tenders which are given away. So year in, year out, the AG releases reports which are painting a gloomy picture, not a rosy picture about local government, because the control measures more often than not are eroded.
So in other words, the policies that currently exist within, or that municipalities need to implement are better on paper than they are, in action. But yet, time and time again, you find that the same ruling party, the ANC, which has been leading this government, is still, being voted for at grassroots level. What are we likely to see this time around, given just the recent developments within the political parties, particularly the ruling ANC?
The political longevity or the political lifespan of liberation movements tends to be extended. Political behavior doesn't change overnight. But what we have seen is that at local government level, one-party dominance is a thing of the past. The ANC was dealt with a blow. In 2016, it lost 3 urban centers, and I don't think that it is going to bounce back. The ANC received 53% on the whole, by and large, nationally, compared to the 66% that it received in 2011. So clearly, you can see a downward electoral trend there. And I don't think that is going to improve. But it must be noted that the electoral base of the ANC is found in poor areas, in particular in rural areas. Why? Because of the influence of traditional leaders, which are on the payroll of government. You see, in many rural areas, you find that traditional leaders are more popular than councillors. And because those traditional leaders are on the payroll of government, in return, they bring votes to the ANC. So that base will not be eroded. But in urban centers, I think the situation is going to create a scope for coalition formations. But the challenge is that sometimes those coalitions are about trade-offs, musical chairs, and the political elite, they tend to rush into forming those coalition formations without developing a conflict management mechanism to deal with their internal contradictions.
Now, Dr. Breakfast, if we have to look at that statistics that you've just mentioned, particularly 2016 and those 3 urban centers that the ANC lost, you've mentioned coalition, which was going to be my next question. Which political parties, opposition parties, are likely to form those coalitions? We know that 2 political parties just during the runoff, to the voter registration, saying that they will never form a coalition with the ANC. Who are we likely to see, as you say, and as you've termed it, playing musical chairs?
I think, there is a huge gap between the ANC and the opposition parties. The problem that we have is that political fragmentation and lack of majoritarianism, those are the factors that are creating conditions for coalition arrangements. Now, the challenge is that the DA, for instance, it does have an upper hand, but then there are also other issues of race there, because I'm not trying to be funny. You see, when you look at white voters, when they vote, because people vote along racial lines, whether you like it or not. When white voters vote, they vote as a political bloc. They go full force. They vote for the DA, by and large, except what had happened in the general elections, that some of them voted for the Freedom Front. But normally, they vote as a political bloc, full force for the DA. But white people, in my humble opinion, though they can vote, all of them, for the DA, but they constitute a tiny minority. So they need a buy-in from the black bloc, from the colored bloc, and maybe from the Indian bloc. But now there are still issues between the DA and some black people in townships. Some people might not trust them, especially in the light of what had happened with the issue of Musi Maimane. So I think they can gravitate to the colored bloc, because you see, the ANC believes in what they call the liberation of black people in general, Africans in particular. Now, that statement, I'm not talking about the rightness of that or the wrongness of that, but it doesn't sit well with some people in some quarters, in particular with some of the colored people and the Indian people, because it begs the question as to who is black, who is an African. And because of that, maybe the DA can find some voters in those areas. But there are also some people who are also unhappy about the way things are at the moment in the DA, because they feel like, people like Patricia de Lille, they got a raw deal. That's why there have been many colored political parties that have emerged of late. So the terrain is fluid. The terrain is fluid. You can't tell which party is going to emerge. Of course, you have the EFF, which did very well in 2016, but they have not been doing well of late with regard to the by-elections.
And it is very concerning then, Dr. Breakfast, in terms of how you are packaging, the approach of some of these opposition parties, because one would think that with the weakening of the ANC in some sectors and some structures, as you've rightfully indicated too, one would imagine that you would have a stronger opposition party. But from what I'm hearing from you, that's not what we are likely to see, even in these elections.
Of course, because in this country, opposition parties are fragmented. Because you see, the greatest advantage of the ANC is its collective memory, because it is a liberation movement. That's why the ANC doesn't want to let go of that description of calling itself a liberation movement. So a lot of people still vote in relation to party loyalty, historical factors, and so on. But some of the die-hard ANC members might stay away from the polls, and then that will create a scope for opposition parties to do well.
All right, Dr. Breakfast, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate your analysis.
You're welcome.
Political analyst there, Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast.